So I hope we're live. Today's the daily 11 o'clock. We are not planning on doing Saturday and Sunday 11 o'clock Eastern time videos, YouTube live videos this weekend, unless we get a lot of pushback. We'd like to take a break. We know that some people have been using these to calm down and relax a little bit and get some balance. Again, if we get a lot of requests, we'll be happy to do it. Today, I do want to cover an update on ACE inhibitors and ARBs and the blood pressure medicines and COVID-19. There was a commenter yesterday that said, you know, I've heard that there's problems with ACEs and ARBs, and could you do a video on it? The response was, well, yes, we did one maybe a week ago. But you know what? There's been a lot of work going on since then. It hasn't, the picture, the recommendations haven't changed that much, but I thought it would be helpful to go back through some of the continued research, continued standards committee development that's going on in this area. And again, we'll talk about why ACE inhibitors and ARBs are such a big deal for COVID. A couple of very interesting reasons. So as we finish up today in terms of the feature thing, we'll just do a brief update on COVID-19 and diabetes, pre-diabetes. We'll do, we've got a couple of clips. One is a news coverage clip. We have one from the New Orleans outbreak mentioning diabetes and pre-diabetes. And I think the one we're going to cover today is more coverage on the Fox 2. And, you know, somebody said, Doc, please don't cover Fox. I'm sorry. Fox has got some good stuff. Someone else said, please don't cover New York Times because it's the opposite of Fox. It's some sort of leftist newspaper. You know, I know that the media are very political. We covered politics yesterday, and we'll mention politics quite often. You can't avoid it. Bottom line is, we're going to be apolitical in terms of where we get information. The point has nothing to do with partisan positions. The point has to do with some news regarding a key topic in the science here, and this one being prediabetes, diabetes, and COVID risk. We're covering that again because that's such a big issue for this channel. If you look at this channel, it's all about a pandemic that's going on that's, believe it or not, far bigger, far more damaging than COVID-19. And you know what I'm talking about, prediabetes. In America alone, over 80,000. We knew that, CDC knew that, a decade ago. And then they began to realize that it's far bigger than that. Even when they thought there was only 80,000 or a third of American adults, at that point, they still knew that only 8,000 knew it. So there's a major pandemic going on. It's interesting when you fast forward to the age of COVID-19, the folks that are really getting damage are those same people. It's not young people, it's not healthy people, it's people that have insulin resistance, or excuse me, I use the scientific medical jargon there, the people that have prediabetes. At least 90% of whom don't know it. You follow this channel and people will talk. You'll get a few comments each month where people said, Doc, I did the testing that you're talking about and I don't have prediabetes. I've got full-blown diabetes. And my doc's been telling me I'm okay. I don't have a problem. Or more common, my doc's been telling me I've got just a little touch of sugar, so I decrease the sugar in my coffee from 2 teaspoons to 1. That's not where you're getting most of your carbs. So anyhow, let's go back. We will cover those feature items, and then we'll have, as usual, some Q&A at the end. But we'll get started on blood pressure medicines and COVID right after this. Carl? So we're going to talk about, again, ACEs and ARBs. What does that mean? Angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor and angiotensin receptor blocker. You probably wish you hadn't asked that question. You don't need to remember that name at all. Again, medical jargon, that's not the point. The point is these medications have been found to be very, very helpful for management of blood pressure, especially blood pressure associated with diabetes and prediabetes. Now, they've come under a lot of fire. In fact, there was an article, it was in Lancet Respiratory Medicine on March 11th, just 3 weeks ago. It was by Lei Fang, George Karakilakis, sounds Greek to me, and Michael Roth. These guys said, look, they talked about the situation where the SARS-2 uses the ACE-2 receptor blocker to get into the cell. And they talked about the fact that these medications are very much involved with blocking that receptor. Their logic and some of the data that they quoted indicated that when you're using ACEs and ARBs, it may actually increase the number of ACE-2 receptors that you have in your cell membranes as a response to that medication. Their statement, therefore, was, these data suggest that ACE-2 expression is increased in diabetes, and treatment with ACE inhibitors and ARBs increases ACE-2 expression. Consequently, the increased expression of ACE-2 would facilitate infection with COVID-19. We therefore hypothesize that diabetes and hypertension treatment with ACE-2 stimulating drugs increases the risk of developing severe and fatal COVID-19. Well, talk about, a lot of people think that was irresponsible. I don't know, but I'll tell you this, it clearly got reactions everywhere. And, given what I do for a living, like I said before, ARBs, and especially even more so, ACE inhibitors are key items. Very, very good for managing blood pressure, decreasing the damage that occurs to tissue associated with blood pressure, and especially blood pressure associated with prediabetes. And guess what? Most blood pressure is associated with prediabetes. So, firestorm of questions, a lot of people asking information. I'll give you one hint before we go further. I'm on one of those medications, Benazepril. I used to be on a different one, Ramipril, until we started running into problems sourcing it. Never missed a dose. Don't plan on missing a dose. At some point, things may change, but not yet. So even at the time that people started asking questions, very soon after that Lei Fang article, the European Society of Cardiology responded, and thankfully so, very, very quickly. Their position was, the Council on Hypertension strongly recommended that physicians and patients should continue treatment with their usual antihypertensive therapy because there is no clinical or scientific evidence to suggest that treatment with ACE inhibitors or ARBs should be discontinued because of the COVID-19 infection. So again, that was coming out very, very soon. Now, a bunch of other groups have studied it more deeply and weighed in. A recent article in the Lancet with Lei Fang, pardon me for having to clear my throat, no other symptoms, no fever, no cough, etc. The more recent article in the Lancet, Respiratory Medicine, Antihypertensive Drugs and the Risk of COVID-19, Christopher Tignanelli and others. Lei Fang suggested withholding ACE inhibitors, ARBs, because of COVID-19. And he also suggested, or the group also suggested at that point in that early article, that we switch to calcium channel blockers. That was a premature hypothesis. It caused confusion across media and the medical community and a lot of other places. despite calls from the European Society of Cardiology, now the Hypertension Group of Canada, the United Kingdom Renal Association, and the International Society of Hypertension, all saying, don't make that change. Now, since then, the New England Journal has published an article weighing in on this issue. Now, they said, yes, of course, guidance is needed. Withdrawal can be dangerous. And they came up with the alternative hypothesis that has been coming out since then. We propose that an alternative, again, hypothesis that ACE-2 inhibitors may actually be beneficial. So, again, the underlying recommendation was continue your medications. Clinical trials are currently underway. Don't make a change at this point. And the title of the article was Renin-Angiotensin-Aldosterone System Inhibitors in Patients with COVID-19. So again, you asked for it. I gave you the update. People typically, I still see a lot of patients. And patients will say, well, doc, you gave me a whole lot of information. I'm still not sure what I want to do. And my perspective is I give you the information. You're the executive. I'm your consultant. I don't feel a problem if you feel strongly about switching. I'm not. I don't recommend that you do. And again, usually the next question or statement is, well, I do want to know what you're doing and what you would do if you were me. And again, hopefully that's helpful. I would not switch at this point. I think there is enough validity to this alternative hypothesis that they may actually even help. So since then, the American Heart Association has now offered guidance. Again, consistent with the second one, don't stop. The American Heart Association new guidance went on to quote what they knew about Wuhan. Again, early information coming out. Mortality of 10.5% among people with cardiovascular disease. At that point, it wasn't so clear about the diabetes question. 7.3% with diabetes, 6.3% with lung disease, and 6% with high blood pressure. Again, after going through all of the data and a lot of follow-up data since then, their recommendation for the American Heart Association was don't stop your ACE inhibitors or your ARBs. Now, on the other hand, do watch medications that increase your blood pressure. Very common medications like NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen. Oral contraceptives, obviously alcohol can increase the blood pressure. They also made a comment about caffeine, at least after that third cup of coffee in the day. And licorice. Now, again, people know that I have no problem arguing with and using options of medicine that are outside of some of the standards committees because, again, I dig that deep in terms of looking at that, especially in cardiovascular care. For example, I focus less on statins. I don't recommend statins usually based on LDL level alone, cholesterol level alone. I recommend statins only when people have documented plaque. Now, why do I bring that up? Because again, you may be saying, well, Ford, you're just talking about standards committees and you're just following in line. No, I'm very comfortable arguing with the standards committee. I'm very comfortable in not following the advice of standards committees, especially in this cardiovascular area. I think they're right on this one. I haven't seen a single one that's going the other way, and I'm not going the other way either. And I'm voting with my feet. I'm continuing my ACE inhibitor. So I hope that's been helpful. Now, Carl, let's go back and cover that information, that first news video about prediabetes.
Yeah, Dr. Smith, you have new fascinating data tonight on your COVID-19 patients. Now, you have 72 of them. 21 were pre-diabetic. That's 29.2%. 34 were diabetic, that's 47.2%, and the average BMI of severely ill patients, that's body mass index, is 30.7%. Tell us more.
That's a score of 30.7, and above 30, above 25, you're overweight. Above 30, you're obese. The more we see this disease, the more we understand that severe rapid COVID disease, especially, is in diabetics or pre-diabetics. We have, I'm looking at 19 or 20 patients that are intubated, and 18 of the 20 were intubated, or diabetic rather, and 2 are pre-diabetic. We don't have anybody that's been intubated in our group of over 80 now that was not diabetic or pre-diabetic that was intubated. We had severe disease. We've seen younger patients with severe disease that have a very high BMI. We have patients that are 150 kilograms, so I'm doing the math quickly, that's over 300 pounds. We're seeing a lot of this. And I don't understand, and just now I think the world's catching up to this. The Seattle group published on their data in the New England Journal of Medicine, saying that 58% of their ICU COVID patients were diabetic, and that their average BMI was 33, which is morbidly obese. So that fits with our data, but what people haven't focused on yet is that the pre-diabetics are also at risk, especially if they have a high BMI.
So thank you, Carl. I got hit. So as you can tell, again, this channel, if there's any one simple item that this channel's about, and a lot of people think it's complicated because we've got over 700 videos, but almost all of them come right back around to one item, and that is this even larger, more damaging current epidemic of prediabetes. So yes, I hammer on that issue. That old adage, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I'll admit, I'm a hammer in terms of looking for risk factors and risk associated with hidden, undiagnosed prediabetes. So I got sort of twisted around my axle when I had a comment yesterday. I'm not going to read the comment or the name, but the person said, "Doc, your channel would be a lot more helpful if you quit shaming people with prediabetes, about prediabetes and with prediabetes, and you talked about more practical ways of dealing with it." So I guessed that he'd not seen many of my videos. And I sent him some videos where we talked about practical ways of dealing with weight, practical ways of dealing with getting into details in terms of lifestyle, in terms of managing carbs, using a continuous glucose meter, looking at different tests, and especially where I talked about my own challenges. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I remember sitting in the back of the pew like a lot of other Southern Baptists and hearing a lot of hellfire and brimstone type of preaching. I never really thought of myself as a preacher. And again, that sort of took me sideways. Janice, who's our health coach and very, very in touch with and deep on this issue about health coaching and shaming, said, "No, you don't shame people." In fact, we had talked about it, and I did a video on shaming, and she was talking about my reaction. She said, you tend to be open about your own challenges, and it may not shame you, but a lot of other people would feel ashamed of some of the stuff that you go through. So again, no question. Couple of comments, and then we'll end the feature part, this update on prediabetes, with a video that she took of me when we were a few days ago.
Right there, and then we got Dairy Queen right there where they have the soft vanilla ice.
Go ahead.
Right there, and then we got Dairy Queen right there where they have the soft vanilla ice cream dipped into hard chocolate shell.
What else have you passed?
The Boo-Boos at Ruth Hunt Candy Store, bourbon balls, and McDonald's and Burger King, and Versailles Brew Pub.
So thank you, Carl. Again, for that viewer that talked about me shaming others, I've had several videos on my own food addictions, my sweets addictions. Actually, I've suggested many times, I've made more progress on a lifetime sweets addiction with a supplement called Gymnema Silvestre. I've done a couple of videos on that recently. Obviously, I wasn't, I'm not going to take a fast food tour, but here's what happened. Our son is about an hour away in Louisville. We did not go, we visited him. Here's what we did. Janice, I'm comfortable doing Skype with our son or FaceTime, but she wanted to actually be physically in the same space as he was. So I agreed. We drove over to a large mall that was closed. He and his girlfriend got out. They walked about 10 feet away from us on the other side of the lane in the parking lot. So we walked around and talked for about an hour. On the way back, here's part of the problem. I'm one of those people that you see some memes about this. My daughter sent one recently. It was a sloth, so it was a funny looking face, but here's what it was saying. I just ate my 2 months worth of food for the shutdown in 2 days. I'm hungry recently, very hungry, and went out and looked. And as we walked around that mall and we saw those pictures of Girardelli ice cream and cheeseburgers, and it was painful. And then on the way back, we drove by a place where we used to go to get secondhand bourbon balls, Ruth Hunt. I used to be a big addict of those as well. And I was thinking, gosh, I'm so hungry. It would be, and all this, there's another thing actually that, pardon the digression, but it has to do with this. One of the things I did when I was back at Hopkins, in fact, one of my major focus points there had to do with HIV, and it was focused on addicts. One of the things I learned from the mental health researchers there at Hopkins about addiction is that addicts tend to be much better off when they're breaking away from the source or the substance of their addiction until it's nearby, and then they just break out into a sweat and it becomes a big, big deal. And as I continue to work on my own addictions to sweets, to different food addictions, it's like that was a major experience in that space. I was actually okay until all of these ads for junk food got in front of my face, and it was like, So anyhow, thanks for listening. Thank you for your interest. And no, I try not to shame people. I do try to get people to be aware of the challenges that we're dealing with. And sometimes maybe I do come across as, like they say, the worst saint is a reformed sinner. So maybe sometimes I do come across as that old Southern Baptist minister. If I do, and if it helps somebody become aware of this and get warned and start dealing with their problem, I'll take that hit. So thank you very much. We do have a lot of interest here. My goodness, we started off with a donation. Karen Black, $50. Thank you so much. Karen is saying, thank you for all you do. I've sent your YouTube and website info to all of my family and some of my friends and coworkers. People can be stubborn, but I'll keep trying to get them to see the dangers of sugar, carbs, and inflammation. Thank you so much. And Hull 39, excellent, another contribution. Again, 20, thank you guys, I do appreciate it. You know, I have to tell you, I got choked up and had to cut off early yesterday when somebody gave a $50 contribution. It's like, and here's why. I've retired 3 times, and I used to have a day job. At this point, I'm working like 16-hour days on this because it's a passion. And here's how I support it by seeing patients. I've not taken a salary from it. In fact, for a few years prior to that, I was pouring money from my day job into this activity. But again, I feel very strongly that this is an unrecognized pandemic, and I know that it's killing a lot of people. And it's not just me. Start looking it up. So when somebody gave $50 yesterday, it was like people are finally beginning to get this and appreciate it. And I do appreciate and actually contributing your own money, your own time, your own focus to helping us move forward with this. So I guess it goes without saying, any contributions we get on this will continue to go back to paying Carl, for example. Carl's in the Philippines, so the Philippine economic structure is totally different from the U.S. We've got several folks in the Philippines helping us. They've got some great people. Like Carl, for example, knows video editing very, very well. We've got some great nurses, and we'd love to expand the information that we can provide for folks. Thank you again. So let's go back and start up here and see what sort of questions and comments we've got. Standing by, ACE user. Okay, so D. Crispin, I hope that helps. Bart Robinson got the alert and tuned in. Nancy DeBrosek, I take candesartan. Thank you, Carl. I take candesartan. I've been very concerned about my high blood pressure and this virus. Nancy, I don't know if it was you that made that comment yesterday or not. So again, I hope this has been helpful. Are there any concerns with Ramipril and using D3, K2, and zinc and minerals? I think you meant maybe zinc and mineral supplements. The answer is no. Again, on a personal basis, I took, and with my patients, I recommended ACE inhibitors with D3 and K2 and zinc and mineral supplements. So, yeah. At Rob, yes, on the calming down and balance. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for what you do. I need this. Well, if you want me to continue on Saturdays and Sundays, it's a little bit of a wear and tear, but if it's making a difference in terms of a wear and tear for you guys, just let me know. Dave Murphy made a big contribution yesterday. Really appreciate it. Love the videos, but if you need a break, by all means do what's best for you. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And what is that? Is that that looks like, oh, that looks like a big rig truck. Jerry Sullivan, I take half tablet of irbesartan for high blood pressure. Dave Murphy, another contribution. Thank you again so much. Really appreciate that. And you know what? Hopefully you will, well, actually this message that you're supporting is getting out there. One of our commenters the other day made the comment that you get a couple of thousand views on each of these each time. That's pretty good, but it should be more like 2 million. Yeah, if it were 2 million, we might start getting that message across to a small portion of the pre-diabetics that don't know that they're diabetic. So did you mean to say 80 million instead of 80,000? Did I say 80,000 pre-diabetics? I probably did. Again, 80,000 pre-diabetics. 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 I probably did. one of those public speakers that sort of just butchers the English language. Thank you for the fact check. It's 80 million. And that 80 million, by the way, just so you know, even folks at the CDC, as conservative as they are about this, are beginning to acknowledge that it's probably more than 80 million and probably a lot more. They used to think that this prediabetes problem started in the 50s and 60s, and it really does ramp up in the 50s and 60s. But with the obesity epidemic, it's getting younger and younger. A couple of years ago, the UCLA published an article showing and did research showing that it's not waiting till 50s and 60s. Over half of the people in the state of California 2 years ago had either prediabetes or full-blown diabetes. Here's the kicker on all of that. That data, those surveys, those studies did not include oral glucose tolerance tests or Kraft insulin survey. Those only included fasting blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C. And those are both notoriously bad for having a lot of false negatives. And you're hearing a lot about false negatives in the news recently with high false negative rates, for example, for COVID. Well, a lot of high false negative with hemoglobin A1C and fasting glucose for prediabetes as well. Thank you, Karen. So Bob Weiss, North Georgia Mountains, good morning. How are you? Phyllis DeVore, I take 200 milligrams of metoprolol. Metoprolol is a beta blocker, has nothing to do, doesn't impact these the receptors that we're talking about. Never, it's not related, isn't in the agenda. Erlen in Beaverton, Oregon, good morning, Doc. Thanks for giving us the best, most trustworthy information on the internet. Well, thank you. Old NJB, super sticker. Thank you very much, Old NJB. I don't recognize that moniker, but thank you. Robert Pensky, seen you quite a bit, seen your comments. Thank you very much for your interest. When I take an ACE inhibitor in Vegas, I never get a blackjack. That took me a while. And for those of you who are still sort of spinning, an ace, you know, an ace of, in terms of cards. Aces count for 11, so if you've got a face card and then you pull an ace, you've got 21, or blackjack. So, Chair O'Sullivan, uh-oh. That was one of those episodes where, let's see if we can find it. Patrick Leland, always enjoyed your video, but this one really touched me. I'm wondering if you're talking about where I went nuts on fast food and especially sweets. You know, when I was talking about McDonald's and Burger King, the McDonald's thing was, and actually we passed the other one. I can't remember the name of that other fast food, but it was the one that had the soft ice cream and they dipped it in the warm chocolate, so you get this hard chocolate shell over the vanilla ice cream. And that was like, oh, I used to love those. I would still love those if I could eat them. I think I've had maybe, well, gosh, there were times up to about 6 or 7 years ago where there was one near Toyota where I was working and I was getting like 5 or 6 a week. I think it's been, I don't know if I've had any in the past 6 years, 8 years. So Elizabeth Montalvo Coulter, I feel like you can't tiptoe around it. Leave us any wiggle room and we'll eat everything. I understand that. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. Well, thinking about working on it, beginning of my journey. You know, that sounds bad when you say, well, working on it, but thinking about working on it, beginning my journey. When you actually look at the science of behavior change, and the stuff that Janice has trained so well in. There are stages of commitment, and that first, there's pre-contemplation, then there's contemplation, and you're right in that space. So don't be too critical of yourself, because you can get there. One other comment about my background. My dad was my height, 5'10". He weighed over 350 at several times in his life, and between 350 and 300 when he died with a heart attack. And it blew out a lot of his heart, and he ended up with severe heart failure. I go between 150 and 165. So my dad weighed more. He was carrying 2 of me. And I won't go back into it, but I used to go home on holidays, and food would be desserts would be lining every flat surface in the house. Again, came from very bad culture around food. And that's not unusual in South Carolina, where I grew up. Bob Weiss, Quito Bakery might be an idea. Call your local baker and see if they do keto brownies, cookies, cheesecake. I've got some keto stuff. There's actually some keto things that you can get on the internet. I can't remember the name of it, but I've ordered several of those. One of my patients sent me some keto ice cream popsicles. I had not had ice cream popsicles in, gosh, years. And I can't remember the name of it. But they were really good. The sweetener that they used was, I'm blanking on the name now. I shouldn't, a senior moment. Chair O'Sullivan, you can make your own keto food. Oh yeah, and I've done that. Actually, after watching Old Alabama Gardener make biscuits, I got some, I think it was almond flour or coconut flour, and made some keto biscuits, believe it or not. Keto potatoes, mashed potatoes, obviously, very common trick, but make it with cauliflower instead of potatoes. Ed Samil, we appreciate you, Dr. Ford. Love you. Well, thank you, Ed. I appreciate that and love you too. Good morning. Doc, Rob T07, do you have a preferred form of vitamin C? We've talked about vitamin C on several of these videos, and here's the thing. I get a lot of pushback on that, a lot of statements. Doc, will you go into the whole vitamin C, true vitamin C versus ascorbic acid issue, and will you go into the lysosomal vitamin C issue? And I have to tell you, I have not investigated those. I don't know the answer about, I don't know the space, I don't know the facts, I don't know the evidence around these different gradations. Those of you, and I'm sure you do, Rob, since you asked the question, know that there's a perceived gradation where ascorbic acid is cheap, not supposed to be as good or as effective, and then there's real vitamin C, and then there's lysosomal vitamin C. Ed Samuel, please spread the word about wearing masks to protect against COVID-19. As you see, there's a lot of buzz right now at the CDC and other federal recommendation areas saying, look, we may have been screwing up for the past 2 decades when we were saying in the West, don't use masks. And in the East, Japan, China, they were using masks on a regular basis. I very much suspect that we're going to have some official recommendations coming out over the next 48 hours. So thank you for bringing it up, Ed. Jackie Shaheen, have you read any clinical trial on Chinese herb berberine? Seems to work as well as metformin. It's not quite as good as metformin, Jackie. I have read some of those articles, and I do use berberine, and I do recommend berberine. You are right in terms of saying it does a lot of the same stuff. So there's a lot of people who don't like to try metformin. For the most part, I don't think metformin is. I actually question whether or not metformin would or should have been made a prescription medicine. I think metformin very well could have fit better in the non-prescription or supplement over-the-counter. Anyway, fairly benign. And I'm very much aware of some of the information that's coming out now about mitochondrial function. And yes, I watch Rhonda Patrick, and yes, I've seen the David Sinclair interviews about those. And here's the thing, for people that get really aggressive, very athletic, for example, I do some fairly aggressive high-intensity intervals. What I do still take metformin, but what I do is I don't take metformin on the days that the days before the days I'm going to be running. I take a combination of both metformin and pioglitazone. And I take those on days when I'm refeeding and not so much on days when I'm fasting or at a lower level of caloric intake. Ken S. Hi, Doc. Any comments on Ken, I think you were the guy that did our first $50 contribution and that got me all choked up and I had to stop yesterday. Thank you very much. Hi, Doc. Any comments on 48-hour water fasting during this COVID pandemic? I've seen several different videos about fasting. So here's the thing. Fasting is a stress. It's a stressor on your immune system. It's a stressor on several different areas of your body, your metabolics. But you know what? High-intensity intervals are stressors. Resistance training is a stressor. I'm still doing fasting. I'm not doing quite so much the 48-hour fasting that I've always done for a few years. I've gone back to more of it's an at home or do-it-yourself fasting mimicking type diet where I'm dropping my calories to like 500 or 600 for 4 or 5 days. I did start off 3 weeks ago when I started off I got a week's jump on most of the rest of the world in terms of going into social isolation. And I started that with a 2-day water fast. So, but then I went on into more of that 500 to 700 calorie fasting mimicking home version. So I think that I'm getting to your point, Ken, that again, this does stress the immune system. And do you really want to stress the immune system when you've got this going on? I don't plan on fasting the 2 days before we go grocery shopping again. But I'll tell you this, I don't think we're going to have to go grocery shopping for another couple of weeks. And I think we are really honing our grocery shopping skills. If you have any questions about those, Janice actually joined me. She's got a good focus on some areas where I didn't, and vice versa. It creates opportunity for not only debate, but also some opportunity for both of us to learn. She used to give me a hard time about buying and freezing food and buying canned products and holding on to them forever. Guess what Janice has been eating the past week or so? All that food that she used to say was so awful, like those canned beans or those, I got some, a big, it was, I don't know, what is that? It wasn't a bushel, but it was a lot of fresh green beans. A few months ago, I chopped them up. I put a little cheese, Parmesan powder on them, sauteed them. It was so many of them that I froze a bunch of them, and they've been in the freezer for, gosh, not weeks, but months. And Janice used to make so much fun of that. She's been eating them this past week, as well as a lot of my other food of mine, because guess what? COVID-19. So she's actually, she's become much more open to frozen food, and I've become much more open to washing my hands. David Ferguson, Forgerson, do you have a recommended machine for monitoring your blood pressure at home? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them now. The first ones came out were kind of sketchy, but most of the, I'm blanking on the name, and I used to keep one right around here. Gosh, if I can remember, I will. I'll bring it out later. It's the very common name. Somebody fact checked me, and somebody suggests the name. It's those machines now are pretty good. There are a couple of different brands that are good, but I have 3 of them. They're at the other end of the house, and I checked my blood pressure again today. With all the fasting I've been able to do over the past 3 weeks, my blood pressure has dropped because my weight has dropped. Keith Allen, if I decided to switch from an ARB to a calcium channel blocker, how would I go about it? Switch cold turkey or taper off? You don't have to do quite as much tapering with the blood pressure medicines as you do with the statins. Statins, having 2 different types of statins on board can cause significant problems, but we actually routinely mix different types of blood pressure medicine. In fact, there's a lot of standard mixes of ARBs and calcium channel blockers. I'm on a mixed benazepril and amlodipine. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a lot of mixes there. The major issue for that is don't take too much at the same time with the new combination, because the combinations can have an even bigger impact on your blood pressure, and you don't want to faint out. Blake Jackson, you provide an invaluable service. Thank you very much, Blake. And when you guys watch and you comment, you show the machine that this is worthwhile information, and it gets back, the machine recommends it to other folks. So thank you for your investment of time. Banjo Benson, if my wife had found IV vitamins first instead of chemo and radiation, she would be alive today. Since then, I've been doing a lot of research and found low carbs help greatly. Karen Black, don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you very much, Karen. And, you know, we got excited. Our team got excited when some of you guys started making contributions the other day. So Clyde had originally shown folks how to do it. We went in and tried to figure out how to do it. We couldn't figure it out. We know that there's a way. And Carl, if you don't mind, one of the assignments that we'd have for you is to figure out how to show folks how to get to that, how to find the like button, and especially how to find that contribution button. We really appreciate it. Bob, speaking of which, Bob Weiss, Northern Georgia Mountains, where's the contribution button? So I'll say this, Bob, I've known it and I've heard and I've seen images, but I couldn't find it when we went off. And part of the problem was we couldn't find it with someone doing a YouTube live. But if you go down to the chat section, there, just to the right of that chat section, I think there's a $ or something. Maybe Karen or Mark or some of you that have hit it could comment and help us. And again, Carl, if you could, please get that information out for the next versions. Chair O'Sullivan, 90-second keto mug cake. Oh, here you go. You see that? You go. Well, that's part of the reason I didn't find it before, Carl. You go to the bottom of the chats, like you're going to enter a chat yourself, and right under that chat, you'll see, I think this is a like button, and then right next to it is the, now it's gone, Carl. Right next to that's a donation button right there. So thank you, Bob, and thank you, Carl. And thank you, Chair O'Sullivan. So, Alex J., morning, doc. Oh, let me remove this part from the screen. Carl, we need to do that as well when we have that tunnel appearing. Alex J, morning doc. I'm trying to take Crestor 5 milligrams, but nausea is awful. I've hardly ever run into someone that had significant nausea with 5 of Crestor, and we use it a lot. In fact, for a few years, that was my go-to statin when somebody had plaque. I try instead to buy a small bite of the tablet every day, so that would make 10 milligrams per week in total. Does that work? You know, it's interesting, Alex. There's been studies that have shown that even just like 5 milligrams once a week actually has an impact. You see, the half-life for rosuvastatin, generic Crestor, is 17 hours. So you do get a significant long tapering tail on the blood level of it. Now, I would not, I've had a few patients who were on 5 milligrams, a few patients that were on once a week. Don't recommend it. Recommend to try at least twice a week, but yes, 10 milligrams. I've got several people on 5 milligrams twice a week. So Chero, well, when I hit that, Orion, something about coconut milk. I purchased a small ice cream maker and make my own ice cream with coconut milk. Oh, that sounds really good. I was a major homemade ice cream fan. So did learn how to make it more of a keto style. Thank you, Janice. Patreon. Just as a reminder, if you're having trouble figuring this out and you would like to make a more sustained contribution, we have a Patreon account. Look under Patreon Ford Brewer. And again, all of that money's going to pay folks like Carl and Michelle who do so much to help us get that information out to people. Old NJB, John Berkeley. Didn't get that one. Doesn't understand. Amron. Thank you very much, Warren Crow. Amron. That's what I was trying to remember. Amron was out early and fast and has dominated that home blood pressure monitor market. And they still do. Now, there was a couple of newcomers. I can't remember the names, but I've got one of the newcomers. The other two are Amrons. And again, good quality products now. Chero, Amron, thank you very much. John Staples, much gratitude for you here. And you too. This is Gavril. You didn't know that I could read Cyrillic script, could you? I can't. But I know that from Gavril. He lives in the Ukraine. Kiev. You remember the song, Great Gate of Kiev? Wonderful song. And Gavril is using telmisartan and amlodipine. Twin stuff. Very happy with it. It's a good medication. It's a good combination. So the donations button is located under the chat window. That was one of our team. You can also find us at Patreon. Peter O'Boyle, Doc, thanks for the job you do for us. Been watching my carbs for the last 2 years. Last 7 months, very serious about eating super healthy. No drinking. I lost 70 pounds total. You know, it's so interesting. Back when I was working with Brad Bale in Nashville, most of our patients were coming to us from different dentists that had read the book, Beat the Heart Attack Gene. But since this YouTube channel, almost all of our patients now come from the YouTube channel. And it's very interesting. As I made that transition, I started finding some weird things going on. I would see people come in that had little to no inflammation. Their OGTT, oral glucose tolerance test, their insulin survey, all looked really good. But they had significant plaque. The plaque was all calcified and stable. And it was like, I can't figure out what's going on. Well, now I know the first thing to ask is, have you lost significant weight over the past few years? And that's what you see. A huge number, over half of my patients, for example, coming in have lost 30 pounds or more over the past year or two. One a couple of months ago had said, yep, I lost 130 pounds. You know, just amazing. And losing 30 pounds is a major, major improvement. If you had 30 pounds of unnecessary fat mass, that fat tissue is not just energy storage. It is endocrine tissue, and the hormones that it secretes are not good ones. Leptin, yes, but what we call adipokines, don't need to remember that word. It's just bad stuff that creates insulin resistance and inflammation. And guess what? Our obesity epidemic is helping drive the insulin resistance, or the prediabetes epidemic that's causing so much risk for COVID. But again, it's been causing a lot of risk, a lot of death. Number one cause of death, heart attacks, and number one cause of disability, strokes. It's been causing that for decades. So Peter O'Boyle, Doc, thanks for the job you do for us. Okay, we've got that one. Peter O'Boyle, just had my CT scan on my heart, 640, yikes. So again, that's pretty, like I said, Pete, that's very common for what I see. People will have developed prediabetes 40 pounds ago, and they'll get all cleared up in terms of their current labs, but we still end up carrying those scars in our blood vessels. And that's what positive calcium scan is. Amrad works for me. Gavril, unfortunately, the donation option won't work for at least those of us in the Ukraine and maybe all of Europe. I appreciate that, Gavril. We do have a Patreon channel, a Patreon account, if that works for you. Bill Clifford, $2.99. Thank you so much, Bill. Let's help Doc by paying it forward. Thank you so much. It really does. It makes a big difference. You know, and one of the biggest difference for me is that I got worn out last week because I was up to about 12-hour days already. And then when COVID hit, and then Janice said, you know what, you ought to do this daily YouTube live for folks. And I said, yeah, you know, we should, but it was like wearing me out. And again, I'd put a lot of work into these, and then somebody would do something a little bit more sensational and a lot more political, and they'd get 1 million views and I'd get 2,000. I just got very frustrated. But then I come in and you guys actually make contributions. You actually contribute your own resource, and it makes a big deal. Thank you so much. Warren Crow, where's the industry on the use prescription of GGMs, CGMs? Oh gosh, talk about another hot button and another place where I love to argue with the authorities. This is a disaster. We should not. I have no idea why they made Freestyle Libre prescription. You know, maybe they thought that the Freestyle Libre was going to, or even the Dexcom 6 for that matter, maybe they thought it was going to be, how could that be dangerous to know what your blood sugar is? To know that it spikes when you're eating carbs, or that it spikes when you eat lentils, or that it doesn't spike when you eat lentils, or that you're having a spike in the morning. That's what's causing your dawn effect. Or if you do take a carb vacation, let's not do shaming and call it cheating. If you eat some carbs, you go out for a 30-minute walk, and you don't have to do major weightlifting. You can still get a significant, that's like a bump of insulin. It takes the top right off of that spike. So why on earth would they make continuous glucose monitoring prescription? I don't know. I don't understand it. I wasn't there for the deliberation, but I don't agree with it. And we do have a program where we offer CGM prescriptions, continuous glucose monitoring prescriptions, for folks that would like it. Again, you can check in, just go to our webpage. It's prevmedheartrisk.com. and check in with the folks there, and they can help you get set up for that. Jackie Shaheen, did you come across any results that would indicate that blood sugar issues can be triggered by poor digestion? Well, here's there's some linkage in a couple of different areas. There's a thing called haptoglobin 2. It's a genetic variation of regular haptoglobin. Now, not hemoglobin. Actually, haptoglobin is in charge of cleaning up the hemoglobin. When the red blood cells last for about 90 days on average, and then they blow up, and the hemoglobin gets spilled all over the artery. And that's a problem because hemoglobin, what does it do? It carries oxygen, and oxygen is by nature oxidative. So you've got this oxidative oxygen line around. Haptoglobin actually cleans that up. The body, whenever there's a problem, the body usually makes a protein to deal with it. And the protein that deals with spilled hemoglobin is haptoglobin. Now, there's a variation of haptoglobin called haptoglobin 2. If you go back into the genetics, well, I'm so tempted to go down that bunny trail because it's so interesting. Bottom line is that folks that have that have a thing called zonulin, and at the end of the day, believe it or not, they have a thing called leaky gut. And guess what stimulates that leaky gut and that zonulin? Gluten. Some of the different glutens, gliadins, things like that. So believe it or not, the gluten-free diet, which everybody thought was, or so many people thought was may have been silly, may have been made up, it's actually real. And believe it or not, they've gone into the genetics. They've traced the genetics back to a place just north of India, 20 generations back. A significant preponderance in the tropic areas. Very, very common gene at this point. The allelic frequency. Don't have to remember that term, but we all have two alleles. We've got one from our mom, one from our dad. So the frequency of that haptoglobin 2 gene is about 50%. It's very, very common. So what has that got to do with digestion? Again, it causes not only leaky gut, but it's also very much associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease with diabetes. Because if your haptoglobin is not cleaning up your oxygen very well, it can cause some significant problems. Pardon me if that was way too much of a bunny hole. Haptoglobin 2 is a major, unrecognized risk factor for those of us with prediabetes. I'll just leave it at that. FSOCS, I've been to Quito for 3 years, lost 85 pounds, living in Quitopia. I've never heard that. Thank you very much. Sharon O'Neill, thanks to all your help and info. I went from pre-diabetic to normal again. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. It can be done. Vegan for life. What is Norvasc considered? I believe Norvasc is a calcium channel blocker, isn't it? Hayden IQ. Well, Doc, maybe only go live for 1 hour. Don't burn yourself out. Thank you very much for the reminder. We're trying to keep it a little bit shorter. We got it down to 40 minutes yesterday, and here's what happens. I get rolling with these questions, and I enjoy being able to make a contribution. Thank you so much, Hayden IQ. I will go ahead and take that suggestion, and we'll end. Thank you so much for your interest today. And I'll with the team about this weekend. Go ahead, Carl. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate that.